my guidance counselor handed me a brochure on communication skills. After I told her I was being beaten by Bryce and his friends every day, when I begged her to let me talk to the principal, my own dad, she smirked and said, "You people always think your meltdowns count as emergencies." I just smiled at her. That was 4 months ago. Yesterday I stopped hanging out with a bulliest in my junior high class, so their ringleader who they glazed constantly, Bryce, demanded his pet monkeys to gang up on me. Everyone in basically the whole world knew I had autism, but when his little goons found out that I was on the spectrum, it was like something awoken in their brains that made them go feral. Whenever I walked past them, Bryce Scallywag and his friends made flapping motions. Then it became hiding my noise-canceling Sony headphones in trash cans under everyone's lunch garbage. By January, they were shoving me into lockers and filming my meltdowns to post on the school meme page run by students. The first time it happened, I tried going to the guidance counselor. When I walked in, Mrs. Saratoga barely looked up from her computer. "Can I talk to Principal Williams about Bryce and his friends?" I was then interrupted by her looking up at me with this condescending smile. "I know exactly what you people do. Always thinking that normal teenage interactions count as bullying. Always looking for attention." I swear I thought she was pranking me, but then she handed me a brochure for communication skills and went back to filing her nails. I smiled because I had an ace up my sleeve. Principal Williams was my dad, but her dismissal made me realize something. If the guidance counselor wouldn't believe me without proof, maybe my dad wouldn't either. He was always so careful about showing favoritism at school. That's when I hatched my plan. I started crying more visibly when they pushed me. I ate lunch alone in predictable spots where they could corner me. I accidentally walked down empty hallways when I knew they'd be there. I documented everything in a password-protected folder on my phone. Screenshots of the meme page, blurry recordings when I could manage it. Bryce got bolder. He went from shoving to actual punches. His sister Kayla would hold my arms while he'd practice his boxing moves on my stomach. His best friend Connor liked to dump my backpack in the toilet. They thought I was too scared and weak to tell anyone, but after a few weeks, I finally had enough evidence to tell my dad. That night, I felt like a kid waiting for Christmas morning because I knew my dad would destroy them. I woke up before my alarm and strolled downstairs with a confidence I'd never felt before. My dad was already there, making pancakes with smiley faces like he used to when I was little. I sat down with a huge smile. "Hey kiddo," he exclaimed. "I have something that I've been keeping from you," he said, flipping a pancake. "I'm in the process of retiring and it should kick into place soon. They're making the announcement at school today." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. He continued, practically bouncing with excitement. "With the retirement package, we can finally afford that Disney cruise you've always wanted. 7 whole days, just our family." I forced myself to smile and squeal about the cruise while my stomach dropped. Without dad as principal, I had no nuclear option. My evidence meant nothing if he couldn't do anything about it. At school that day, I sat in the bathroom trying not to panic. Then I overheard Bryce and his friend talking by the sinks. "My mom's totally going to win the school board election. Her whole platform is about stopping bullying. She even got that news station to interview her." That's when it clicked. Mrs. Scallywag, Bryce's mom, was running for PTA president on an anti-bullying platform. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed. The election was in 3 days. I spent those days being extra pathetic, extra vulnerable. On election day, I waited by the gym after school, knowing they always went there to VP. When Bryce saw me alone, his eyes lit up. "Look who's asking for it," he said, cracking his knuckles. Connor and 2 other guys formed a circle around me. I didn't fight back. Not when Bryce's fist connected with my eye. Not when Connor kicked my ribs. Not when they took turns seeing who could leave the biggest bruise. Instead, curled up and took it with a chaotic excitement pumping through my veins. They left me there when they got bored. I waited 10 minutes before limping towards the auditorium. My face was swelling. My ribs screamed with each breath, but I had a huge smile on my face. The whispers started immediately. People pointed at my black eye. Someone gasped. I walked straight to the front where the current board members sat. "Mrs. Scallywag says she'll protect kids like me," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But her children, Bryce and Kayla, did this to me yesterday. Your son hit the shot out of me, Mrs. Scallywag." The auditorium erupted. The auditorium fell silent for exactly 3 seconds before Mrs. Scallywag shot up from her seat, her campaign button catching the stage lights. Her hands trembled as she gripped the podium. She stammered, trying to force words through her shock. The carefully prepared speech cards scattered across the floor as she knocked them over. Her campaign manager rushed toward her but stopped halfway, frozen by the spectacle unfolding. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved across the screen with practiced precision. The auditorium's projection system flickered to life behind Mrs. Scallywag. The timestamp in the corner read 3:47 p.m. today. The video filled the massive screen. There was Bryce, his fist connecting with my stomach, while Kayla held my arms behind my back. The security camera angle showed everything in crystal clarity. You could see other students walking past in the background, deliberately looking away. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A mother in the 3rd row covered her young daughter's eyes. An elderly man dropped his coffee cup. The liquid spread across the floor, but nobody moved to clean it. Mrs. Scallywag rushed toward the stage, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. Her voice cracked with desperation as she pointed at the screen. She insisted the video was edited, that I was known for making things up. Her words came out in sharp bursts, each one more frantic than the last. The microphone screeched with feedback as she grabbed it too forcefully. A door opened at the side of the stage. My dad emerged from backstage, his face pale and drawn. He looked at the video playing on the screen, then at me, then back at the video. His principal's badge caught the light as he stepped forward. He spoke clearly into his own microphone, confirming that the video came from the school's security camera system. His voice carried the weight of authority, even as it trembled slightly. The crowd turned to look at him, then back at Mrs. Scallywag. The main auditorium doors burst open. Bryce and Kayla stumbled in, probably looking for their mother after practice. They stopped dead when they saw their assault playing on the giant screen. Bryce's face went from confusion to rage in seconds. He shouted across the auditorium, his voice cutting through the chaos. The slur echoed off the walls. Every single person in the room turned to stare at him. His mother's campaign manager slowly put his head in his hands. A local news cameraman who'd been there to cover the feel-good election story swung his camera toward the action. The red recording light blinked steadily. He moved closer to the stage, adjusting his angle to capture everything. Connor tried to bolt for the exit, but the security guard stepped in front of the door. The other bullies who'd come with him pressed pressed against the walls, trapped. Their eyes darted between the exits and the damning video still playing on loop. Mrs. Scallywag attempted damage control, her political training kicking in. She talked about stress, about this not representing who they were as a family. Her hands gestured wildly as she tried to spin the narrative. Nobody was buying it. I lifted my sleeves slowly, revealing arms covered in bruises of various colors. Purple, yellow, green. A timeline of violence written on my skin. I asked if she wanted to see more evidence. The crowd leaned forward. My dad stepped to the front of the stage. His voice carried across the silent auditorium as he announced he was calling the police immediately. He pulled out his phone, his position as principal giving weight to his words, even though he only had 48 more hours in the role. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Mrs. Scallywag frantically pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed. She turned away from the crowd, but everyone could still hear her desperate plea for her lawyer husband to get there immediately. Other students started finding their voices. A girl stood up and talked about Bryce breaking her glasses the previous week. A boy mentioned his inhaler being flushed down the toilet. The dam of silence was breaking, testimony pouring out from every corner. Mr. Scallywag arrived in an expensive suit, his leather shoes clicking authoritatively. He immediately declared that nobody could talk to his children without his presence. His briefcase hit the floor with a thud as he surveyed the scene. The side door opened again and my mom rushed in from work, still in her scrubs. She saw my injuries under the harsh auditorium lights and broke down. Her words came out between sobs. She'd asked if I was okay, and I'd said yes every single day. Mrs. Saratoga appeared from the administrative offices, trying to claim I had a history of making false accusations. When pressed for specific examples, she fumbled with her words, unable to provide even one instance. Her confident facade cracked under scrutiny. My dad pulled up emails on his phone, showing them to the officers who had just arrived. The messages proved Saratoga had never reported any bullying incidents despite being a mandatory reporter. Her face went white as the implications sank in. The news cameraman spoke rapidly into his phone, going live with breaking coverage. Talk about perfect timing with that retirement announcement. Nothing says surprise kiddo like accidentally destroying your child's entire revenge plan over pancakes, med smiley, and sicker. Mrs. Scallywag running an anti-bullying campaign while her kids practice MMA on classmates. The school board candidate's children accused of assault. The story was spreading beyond the auditorium walls. Phones throughout the crowd lit up with notifications. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a thick folder. Hundreds of documented incidents spilled across the table. Dates, times, witnesses, everything meticulously recorded. The police officers began photographing each page. 3 teachers stepped forward from the crowd. They spoke about reporting concerns about Bryce, about how Mrs. Saratoga always found ways to bury their reports. A clear pattern emerged of protection for certain students and dismissal of victims, especially disabled ones. Mr. Scallywag threatened lawsuits for defamation and conspiracy. He claimed his wife's political enemies had orchestrated the entire scene. His voice rose with each accusation, but the video evidence kept playing on the screen behind him. Connor's parents arrived, pushing through the crowd. They immediately approached the police, apologizing and demanding their son tell everything. Their faces showed genuine horror at what their child had been involved in. Connor broke under the pressure. He admitted Bryce had promised his mom would get them out of any trouble that she always had before. His confession came out in a rush, each word adding another piece to the pattern of corruption. The school board members called an emergency recess. Parents grabbed their children and rushed toward exits while board members huddled in heated discussion. Police officers established a perimeter around the stage area, treating it as an active crime scene. Mrs. Scallywag refused to withdraw from the election, despite mounting pressure. She stood at the microphone declaring she wouldn't be bullied by lies and manipulation. Her campaign team abandoned their posts one by one, leaving promotional materials scattered across chairs. Medical personnel arrived to document my injuries. The paramedics' gentle examination revealed 2 cracked ribs and extensive soft tissue damage. She photographed each bruise meticulously, while shaking her head at the systematic nature of the abuse. The documentation process took over an hour. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from classmates who'd witnessed attacks but never spoken up. Screenshots flooded my inbox, videos from the meme page, messages planning ambushes, photos of my belongings destroyed. The digital evidence multiplied exponentially as students found courage in numbers. Social media exploded overnight. The hashtag #Scallywag scandal trended locally within hours. The security footage clip spread across platforms faster than anyone could contain it. News outlets picked up the story, each iteration adding more damaging details about the family's hypocrisy. 5 families emerged the next morning with their own horror stories about Bryce. Elementary school incidents that had been swept under the rug resurfaced. Parents compared notes about mysterious injuries their children sustained, complaints that went nowhere, meetings with administrators that ended in gaslighting. Mrs. Scallywag appeared on the morning show attempting damage control. She painted me as a disturbed child seeking attention, weaponizing my autism diagnosis against me. The host's skeptical expression deepened with each defensive statement. The interview backfired spectacularly when they played the security footage. Disability rights lawyers contacted my family within hours of the broadcast. They recognized a potential landmark case about systematic discrimination. Pro bono representation was offered immediately. The lead attorney's own autistic daughter had faced similar treatment at another school. School administrators launched an investigation into the meme page. The digital forensics revealed months of coordinated harassment targeting multiple disabled students. IP addresses traced back to school computers used during specific class periods. The evidence painted a picture of organized cruelty. The police arrived at school the following morning. Students pressed against classroom windows watching Bryce get handcuffed in the main hallway. His screams about his mother destroying everyone echoed through the building. The perp walk became another viral moment. Kayla received a suspension pending investigation, but avoided immediate arrest. Her claims of being forced by her brother crumbled when investigators found messages showing she initiated several attacks. She'd specifically targeted younger autistic students who couldn't effectively report abuse. Dad canceled his retirement ceremony to handle the crisis. The district approved an emergency extension of his position. He spent 18-hour days implementing immediate reforms, new reporting systems, mandatory autism acceptance training, Anonymous tip lines. The changes came too late for me but might protect others. Mrs. Saratoga's administrative leave became permanent when the investigation expanded. Union representatives confirmed she'd likely lose her teaching license. Decades of ignored reports surfaced from her personnel file. Her pattern of protecting certain families while dismissing vulnerable students was extensively documented. The Scallywag family hired an expensive PR firm to manage the narrative. Subtle victim-blaming campaigns appeared online questioning my motives and mental stability. Anonymous accounts spread rumors about attention-seeking behavior. The coordinated disinformation campaign fooled nobody who'd seen the evidence. Retaliation came swiftly. Our house was egged repeatedly. Windows were broken with rocks wrapped in threatening notes. Security cameras we'd installed after the first incident captured Bryce's friends conducting the attacks. Each act of intimidation only strengthened our legal case. Death threats forced me into online schooling for safety. The isolation felt like another form of punishment for speaking up. I watched through social media as life at school continued without me. The bullies had found a way to push me out even while facing consequences. Connor's complete cooperation shocked everyone. He provided prosecutors with 2 years of group chat screenshots showing detailed planning of assaults. The messages revealed a sophisticated operation with lookouts, alibis, and specific techniques to avoid leaving evidence. His guilty conscience had been eating at him. The most damaging revelation came from Connor's phone. Messages showed Mrs. Scallywag actively coaching the bullies on avoiding consequences. She'd taught them to avoid hitting above the collar, to delete messages regularly, to coordinate stories. Her involvement went far deeper than simple denial. District officials expanded their investigation beyond our school. The pattern of protecting certain students while dismissing disabled victims appeared systemic. Administrators at multiple schools faced scrutiny. The scope grew from individual bullying to institutional discrimination. Election day arrived with Mrs. Scallywag still on the ballot. She lost in a historic landslide. The winner's first act was establishing an anti-bullying task force. They invited me to serve as a student advisor. My first meeting would be conducted via video call from home. Criminal charges were filed against multiple parties. Bryce faced assault and hate crime enhancements. His parents were charged with conspiracy and child endangerment. The prosecutor built a case showing they knew about and facilitated the abuse. Even their expensive lawyers looked concerned. Mr. Scallywag's law practice hemorrhaged clients daily. Major firms pulled their retainers. Former clients distanced themselves publicly. His reputation in the legal community crumbled as details of witness intimidation emerged. Several families reported threats after speaking to police. Bail hearings revealed the family's deteriorating finances. The judge set Bryce's bail high due to flight risk and continued threats. Their grandmother refused to help, stating she was disgusted by what her grandson had become. The family struggled to raise funds while maintaining their legal defense. My story spread beyond local news. TikTok videos explaining the situation went viral in the hashtag #ActuallyAutistic community. Support poured in from autistic advocates globally. Messages from other victims sharing similar experiences flooded my inbox. The solidarity felt overwhelming but validating. A documentary filmmaker reached out wanting to explore institutional ableism in schools. She'd won awards for previous work on disability rights. The project would examine how schools systematically fail to protect their most vulnerable students. My family agreed to participate. Other autistic students at school began reporting their experiences. An epidemic of unreported abuse emerged. Parents who'd been gaslit into silence found their voices. Support groups formed. The administration faced a reckoning they'd avoided for years. Dad's reforms included mandatory training on neurodiversity and autism acceptance. Every staff member had to complete certification. New reporting systems bypassed traditional channels that had failed. Anonymous tip lines were monitored by outside organizations. The changes were comprehensive. Mrs. Saratoga's arrest made headlines. Prosecutors charged her with failure to report child abuse and endangerment through willful negligence. Her decades-long pattern of dismissing abuse reports constituted criminal behavior. Former students emerged with stories spanning her entire career. The Scallywag family listed their house for sale. They claimed they needed to escape persecution. The mansion sat on the market for months with no buyers. Their notoriety made them pariahs in the community they'd once dominated. Moving became their only option. Kayla's expulsion came after investigators documented her targeting of younger disabled students. College acceptance letters were revoked when schools learned of the charges. Connor's sudden confession feels awfully convenient. I wonder what really made him flip so completely after being part of this for so long. Mrs. Scallywag's coaching messages to the bullies are particularly interesting. Her carefully planned future crumbled. She blamed everyone but herself for the consequences. Trial dates were set for the various defendants. I would have to testify facing Bryce in court. The prospect terrified me, but the prosecutor assured me accommodations would be made. The courtroom would be modified to reduce sensory triggers. Justice required my participation. A complication arose when Bryce's aunt was discovered working in the prosecutor's office. She'd attempted to access sealed evidence files. Security caught her photographing documents. She was immediately fired and charged with obstruction of justice. The family's corruption ran deep. Defense attorneys subpoenaed my therapy records, attempting to paint me as mentally unstable. The judge ruled medical records inadmissible, calling the attempt blatant discrimination. The defense strategy of attacking my credibility due to autism backfired. The judge's own grandson was autistic. Jury selection proved challenging. The Scallywag name was widely known both positively and negatively. Defense attorneys tried stacking the jury with older residents who held outdated views about disability. Prosecutors fought for a representative jury that understood modern concepts of neurodiversity. The trial began with my 6 hours of testimony. I detailed the systematic torture, the escalation, the deliberate targeting of my autism traits. The jury listened intently. Several jurors wiped away tears as I described the isolation and fear. My noise-canceling headphones remained on throughout. Video evidence played on courtroom screens. The jury saw the brutality and coordination firsthand. New footage had emerged from student phones showing additional attacks. The sheer volume of evidence was overwhelming. Defense attorneys struggled to dispute visual proof. Bryce took the stand against legal advice. His arrogance alienated the jury within minutes. He claimed I brought the abuse on myself by being weird and not taking social hints. His lack of remorse was palpable. Even Even his own attorneys looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Scallywag's testimony contradicted her previous statements repeatedly. Prosecutors caught her in multiple lies. Her story changed each time evidence disproved her claims. The jury saw through her attempts to portray her family as victims. Her political training couldn't save her. Dad testified about years of reports that were ignored or buried. He presented documentation showing systematic failures to protect vulnerable students. His professional reputation lent credibility to the institutional critique. Several jurors took extensive notes during his testimony. Connor's testimony devastated the defense. He provided detailed accounts of how Bryce recruited others, planned attacks, and celebrated causing meltdowns. His genuine remorse contrasted sharply with Bryce's defiance. The jury could see the difference between someone taking responsibility and someone denying it. The defense's closing argument relied on outdated stereotypes. They argued boys will be boys and that autism made perception unreliable. The strategy felt desperate and offensive. Several jurors visibly recoiled at the implications. The prosecutor's rebuttal was devastating. Disability rights experts testified about violence against autistic people. Statistics showed we face abuse at rates far higher than neurotypical peers. The systematic targeting of autistic traits constituted hate crimes. The expert testimony provided crucial context for understanding the severity. The prosecutor's closing argument framed the case as organized hate crimes against a disabled child. She methodically laid out the evidence of planning, coordination, and escalation. The institutional failures that enabled the abuse were highlighted. Justice required accountability at all levels. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. Guilty verdicts on all counts, including hate crime enhancements. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Bryce's face went white as reality hit. His parents gripped each other. Connor's family quietly thanked prosecutors for the plea deal. Sentencing brought more drama. The judge called Bryce a danger to society who showed no remorse. Juvenile detention until age 21, then transferred to adult prison, the maximum allowable sentence. His screams about unfairness echoed through the courthouse. The school district's insurance company balked at the mounting lawsuits. 12 families filed claims totaling millions in damages for systematic discrimination. The board held emergency budget meetings while protesters gathered outside demanding accountability. Settlement negotiations dragged through summer as lawyers haggled over liability admissions. Dad's promotion to district coordinator came with immediate challenges. He implemented mandatory autism acceptance training across all schools, despite pushback from traditionalist administrators. Teachers complained about additional certification requirements. He persisted, bringing in neurodiversity experts who demonstrated sensory overload simulations that left skeptics shaken. My first advocacy presentation happened via video link to a middle school assembly. Technical difficulties plagued the connection, while hundreds of students waited. When the feed finally stabilized, I explained how bullying escalates when differences become targets. Students submitted anonymous questions afterward, revealing their own experiences with harassment. The documentary premiered at a local film festival. Cameras captured my family entering the theater through a side door to avoid crowds. The audience sat silent during scenes showing security footage of attacks. Several people left during graphic testimony segments. Awards consideration followed, bringing unwanted attention. The Scallywag Mansion's foreclosure auction attracted gawkers and media. Their possessions were hauled away in trucks while neighbors watched from driveways. Moving vans headed toward a small town 3 states away, where they hoped the story wouldn't follow. Local social media tracked their departure with satisfaction. Connor's community service assignment placed him at a center for disabled youth. His first day involved cleaning bathrooms and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Gradually, interactions with the kids broke through his discomfort. He helped with art projects and learned basic sign language from a deaf teenager. During mandatory therapy sessions, Connor's ADHD diagnosis emerged. His parents discovered they'd been medicating him without proper evaluation to control classroom behavior. The revelation explained his susceptibility to Bryce's influence and inability to resist peer pressure. His genuine transformation began with understanding his own neurodivergence. Speaking requests multiplied beyond my capacity to fulfill them. Schools across the state wanted presentations about recognizing and preventing ableist bullying. Each invitation required careful consideration of travel logistics and sensory accommodations. Dad helped coordinate a speakers bureau of other autistic advocates to meet demand. Federal investigators descended on the district examining discrimination patterns. They requisitioned thousands of documents showing how complaints were systematically buried. Administrators scrambled to comply with subpoenas while maintaining daily operations. The investigation's scope expanded to neighboring districts with similar problems. The new principal introduced a peer mentorship program, pairing older autistic students with younger ones. Initial resistance from some parents worried about negative influences dissolved when early results showed decreased bullying incidents. Mentors received training in active listening and crisis de-escalation. The program became a model for other schools. Senior year arrived with accommodations firmly in place. My modified schedule included quiet testing rooms and permission to wear noise-canceling headphones in class. Some students still whispered when I passed, but most had moved on to new drama. Teachers who'd previously ignored bullying now intervened immediately. A letter arrived from juvenile detention with Bryce's familiar handwriting. Prison officials intercepted his threats before delivery, adding 5 years to his sentence for intimidation. His inability to accept responsibility continued even behind bars. Each violation extended his incarceration further. Mrs. Scallywag's trial concluded with guilty verdicts on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 10 years for conspiracy and child endangerment. Her breakdown in court made headlines as she blamed everyone except herself. Prison transport happened quietly to avoid media circus. College application season brought unexpected opportunities. My essay about overcoming systematic discrimination caught admissions officers' attention. Full scholarship offers arrived from multiple universities with strong disability services programs. Each acceptance letter felt like validation of survival rather than academic achievement. Kayla's apology attempt came through a mutual acquaintance. She wanted to meet and explain her actions, claiming therapy had given her perspective. I declined through the intermediary, choosing to focus forward rather than revisiting past trauma. Her letter went unread into recycling. The Disney cruise finally happened with modifications for sensory needs. The cruise line provided provided a quiet cabin away from engine noise and special dining arrangements. Dad spent most of the trip reading by the pool while I explored accessible activities. Storm clouds on the third day forced everyone inside. Connor's transformation continued at his new school. He started an anti-bullying club focused on bystander intervention. His presentations included personal accountability for participating in harassment. Former victims remained skeptical, but acknowledged his genuine efforts at making amends through actions. Prom preparations included finding formal wear that accommodated sensory needs. The judge handing out maximum sentences like party favors at the world's worst birthday bash. Bryce's screams about unfairness were the cherry on top of this Justice Sunday served ice cold. The tuxedo rental place had never dealt with requests for tagless clothing and soft fabrics. Friends helped create a quiet space in the venue where I could retreat when overwhelmed. Dancing lasted exactly one song before I needed a break. Graduation day arrived with careful planning for crowd management. The administration arranged for me to enter through a side door and sit at the aisle for easy exit if needed. My speech focused on resilience and systemic change rather than personal victory. The standing ovation felt surreal. Summer brought training sessions for new peer mentors. I developed curriculum based on lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Role-playing exercises helped mentors practice responding to various situations. Bryce's younger cousin attended, determined to break his family's cycle of cruelty. The documentary sequel followed my college transition. Cameras captured orientation week struggles and triumphs, finding community among other neurodivergent students. Filming disrupted daily routines, but the director accommodated my needs. The final cut showed realistic challenges rather than inspiration peern. Sophomore year included an internship at a disability rights law firm. Filing briefs and researching case law revealed how legal systems often failed vulnerable populations. The attorneys mentored me through complex litigation strategies. One case involved drafting legislation to classify disability-based bullying as a hate crime. News arrived that Bryce had been transferred to adult prison. His assault on a disabled inmate added decades to his sentence. Other prisoners had no tolerance for those who targeted vulnerable people. His letters home blamed everyone except himself for his circumstances. Law school acceptances arrived during senior year. The same persistence that documented bullying evidence now served academic success. Scholarship offers made attendance possible without crushing debt. Each acceptance represented another step toward systemic change through legal channels. 10 years after that confrontation in the auditorium, I stood before the state Supreme Court. My noise-canceling headphones rested comfortably as I argued for landmark disability protection legislation. The justices listened intently to arguments about hate crime enhancements for disability-based violence. Their unanimous decision created precedent protecting every vulnerable child who would come after. Bryce served his extended sentence while I transformed pain into systemic change. Well, folks, this has been a wild ride. I've had a blast puzzling through all these twists and turns with you. Thanks for letting me wonder out loud. Until next time, CTA. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.